My name is Neil Metzler, and I'm a coach, mentor, and trainer for careers in tech. Welcome to our program. I'm inviting you to take a step back and imagine. Would you like to wake up every morning excited about what you do? What is the big idea keeping you up at night? And what if you are already closer to reaching it than you imagine? Building a bridge to your next career step can be challenging. I know this because I reinvented my career multiple times in multiple countries around the world. There is nothing like achieving a courageous goal that you set for yourself. Change and disruption are only accelerating. Careers are no longer linear. Let us choose to embrace this challenge and move forward together. Thank you. So Chelsea, welcome to your next big thing. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I know we were introduced by one of my season 1 guests, David Dennis, who's a wonderful person. I know that you and David have surfed together, and we're going to talk about a lot of topics today, including surfing, creativity, careers, and big career changes. So I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. Dennis is, as I call him, the local legend in Santa Cruz, and he's someone I look up to both professionally and just how to live life. So it's great to connect.
Yeah. So Chelsea, tell our listeners a bit about how you actually ended up in the startup space, getting your first startup experience with Gametime, because I know your full story arc, and I think that this is emblematic of who you are and how you've gone after the things that matter to you. Yeah.
Sure. So career, kind of the jump off point was back in 2013. I was working in TV in a very unglamorous job, working 2 jobs in San Francisco. I recently graduated from UC Berkeley, and it was at that point in time where you're kind of really thinking deeply about what career path that you want to go down, what industry do you want to work in. And TV, up until that point, I was on the sports broadcasting talent side, but I was working in production at this time. And it really felt at that time that the goals and the way I want to live my life in terms of agency, in terms of the creativity and creating the new show programming, and not just being on the talent side, but being able to create the experience of the show wasn't really on the table for me to do at that period. And so it hit me that I wanted to look into other paths. And growing up in the Bay Area, kind of born in Honolulu, Hawaii, raised in Silicon Valley, it hit me. I kind of grew up that everyone talks about, the greatest, smartest minds work in tech. And I hadn't really even thought about working in startup world or in tech up until that point. I was heading into the newsroom at 4:15 a.m. in the mornings, and my second job.
To do the morning show, right?
To do the morning, yes, morning show. So this was also before like Uber really took off. And so I would grab the bus at some points in time. And I remember Uber was like a luxury some days to be able to take. And so anyways, it was in the afternoon. I was catching up on sleep, and I grabbed the local newspaper. And in the newspaper talked about this local sports and music app ticket called Gametime.
And so you're on the bus, was it one of those, like, you sit down and you're like, yeah, cool, there's a local newspaper next to me, might as well, I'm right here.
Yes.
You just pulled it open.
Yes. And like automatically being a sports person, I always go to the sports section of like, what's the newest and greatest. And, one of my first jobs was writing in the local newspaper. And so there's a big love and respect I have for just like local newspaper writers. They really know their city.
Crucial.
Crucial. And they know their city, and the way they write and the way they storytell has always inspired me. So anyways, I opened it up and went to the sports section, and they talked about the startup. And in the startup, they talked about this company that is focusing on this last minute on demand ticket economy. essentially providing this last minute solution to sports fans and music fans to get into concerts and events last minute. In 2013, at this time, there was StubHub and Ticketmaster, but they didn't have mobile interfaces. And so to me, this really was a solution to a real problem that I also saw that, it just doesn't make sense that there's seats empty right before the game. Huge. And so I called him up, ring, ring, ring. And it's like, hey, thanks for calling Gametime. This is Brad. And I'm like, Brad, like the CEO, Brad? And he's like, yep, how can I help you? And, kind of fast forward, I went out to meet up with the team. I thought they were a 50-person company. They ended up being 3-person company. And, I just was really honest with them. I said, I'm Bay Area raised, went to Berkeley. I know the sports fan experience, like the back of my hand. I played sports in college. I have no background in, startup environment, but I know the fan experience. And, kind of here's my approach that I think that we could really tap into the fan experience in the last minute market. And join the company.
So you didn't ask permission. You didn't say, what's the onboarding plan? You were like, hey, this is important to me. Here's why. And here's what I think we should do about it. That's pretty remarkable.
And jumped in. And it was incredible because fast forward, Brad, has really been not just the CEO of that company, but he has been a mentor of mine in how I work as a UX researcher, how I approach business. He really was the person that kind of provided this opportunity, right? At this point, he started and sold 2 companies. And it's incredible when you can connect with other people that are like-minded. He also played sports in college. And I think when it comes to that approach of like, hey, super matter of fact, I'm really passionate about this area, candor, I don't have any background in it, but I know this element. Are we thinking about these parts of the business? I think that candor mixed with like, here's an opportunity, here's a gap that I see that I could maybe provide, really kind of sparks that ability to connect with people and make something happen.
What if sports meant to you, and why was it exciting to then be able to work at a startup in the sports space? Why was that significant for you?
When it comes to all the incredible things that I kind of experienced growing up, from swimming to basketball, sports has really been this outlet for me to be a part of something greater than myself, I would say. I've been fortunate enough to compete at a very elite level in a couple different sports. And when you get to a place where it's that level, there is this profound gratitude that you are a part of something bigger than yourself. And so when it comes to teamwork, when it comes to showing up, and I love being not the best in the room. I love being surrounded by excellence and elite people doing
push you too.
Yes. Pushing me to be better, to inspire, to wake up at the crack of dawn when other people are most likely sleeping. That is what sports has done for me. And it has been a saving grace at no matter when life gets super busy. I can always go swim. I can go surf. My husband and I play a game of pickup basketball every now and then. And
that's what's up.
Yeah. Or play golf, and a lot of these things was thanks to my mother for providing these arenas for me as a kid who had a lot of energy to express myself. And that is something that has just been the biggest gift of my life. Yeah.
And this has led into your time that you spend out on the waves, right? As a surfer in Santa Cruz and around the world. And I want to talk more about professional and career, but you're also going to tell us on this episode about a big decision you made to go on a personal journey and a personal quest, and then a creative project that I was really inspired by that you created that to me reflected and captured some of what you learned while spending that time away. So in terms of sequentially for the listener, after Gametime, is that when you found your way over to Looker?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So after rocking in tickets for a couple of years, I was profoundly grateful for the opportunity. Um, if you really want to learn how a business runs and what you're capable of, join a 3-person company, start a company, right? And I think I was grateful to join the right company where it was with a leader who I learned so much in a company I truly believe that was solving a real problem at that time in the world. And at that moment, there's always a time where you're ready for something else. And so Looker, insert Looker data platform was solving yet another problem that I experienced in my life. And that was having a data governance layer that really provides people the ability to ask and answer simple business questions without having to learn languages like SQL. That period in time, a lot of what we talk about, Neil, is me being reflective on that period of time. I now work for my dream manager, right? I know what excellence looks like. The opportunity to manage at that time was huge, tremendous life lessons. At some point, you kind of look up and you're like, hey, I'm ready for the next thing. And so at that period, a friend of mine was actually working in sales there.
Sales
And
at Looker
was
in
like,
the very early days.
yes.
Yeah. Even earlier days.
Yeah. And
yeah.
Super early days. Yeah, he joined when they were like 40. And anyways, I joined the company around when they were 1,000 as their first UX researcher.
1,000 employees.
And
yeah.
Yes, so massive, tremendous growth. And one of the core problems of equipping these companies of both enterprise and small startups, the ability to ask and answer questions confidently and the centralized governance layer, that technology was something that I really felt in my job. And so when it came to providing, hey, we can go better understand this core set of users, that problem was something that I was really passionate about. And so that's why I joined Looker.
So let me ask a question here, because this is 2 examples where you've taken something from your own experience, but applied it in a new setting. And you've gone in, you've been able to bridge in and then be successful there. So I'd love to hear if there were mentors that helped you. You mentioned the relationship that the relationships you built at Gametime. Did those also offer more insights into the startup scene, into VCs, that maybe helped you be a bit more savvy by the time that you were then starting to cook with this opportunity at Looker?
Well, also to keep in mind, I have not done this all by myself. I've been very lucky to have mentors. Like, my early mentors were men. They just were. I was surrounded, like, sports industry is heavily male dominated, right? We all know that. It's becoming much better. It's awesome to see all these female executives and leaders coming in the industry. At the same time, those leaders that we had, our VP of product literally sat me down. I was wanting to go to business school one day. I'll never forget this conversation. He goes, you know that you're doing a job of a UX researcher, right? And I was like, what's UX research?
Yeah. Jargon. Like, what is this? Yeah.
What is this? And he told me, he goes, I think you could definitely go to business school, yay. But at the same time, I think you also could lead a really fulfilling life, and also one that you could carve out a niche for yourself in UX research. And so being able to kind of stop the momentum of your career a little bit to connect with people who have more experience than you, to just get the perspective of, but they were able to speak on my work because we work so closely together. So being able to kind of identify the people that you see yourself in, or that you love their leadership, and they could be so different from you. I actually think that that's great, to connect with people much different than you, but being able to get a different perspective, like these little mini consultants of data points, to understand, like, these are the opportunities. How do other people think about these things? I think I'm making this life change. I think I want to, for example, go into marketing, and I'm in support, or I want to become an engineer and I am a product manager. being able to kind of get those data points from a nice sample researcher, but like it is helpful that, one of the big things that's very unique about Looker was when we had lunch and dinner. Well, lunch, dinner was like if you're still at the company, but lunch, we like stopped working and we ate around a table. And in America,
well, what do you mean? Doesn't everyone stop working and go to lunch? Wait, what are you telling me here, Chels?
That was one of like I just was so used to working at my office and like, I don't know, maybe it's like the athlete thing, like eating protein while you're going on like the next thing and eating while you're walking and standing and sitting down. That the company invested in great local produce for us to eat too. So we were fed like, honestly, like elite athletes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Wellness, the wellness component, it's not just lip service. It's not just an app on the phone. It's physical. It's real.
And so kind of a long way to get there, but Looker allowed me to take this trip, this first trip to, after paying off my undergrad student loan debt, I finally had the ability, the time and the resources to take a 3-week trip, a solo surf trip to Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji.
Had you taken that much time off?
No.
In the last years before that? Since how long?
No. I know, excuse my language. Hell no. No. The longest
3 weeks time off. This was 3 weeks was the longest.
Oh, 3 weeks was by far the longest. I think there was a time where I had to take 2 weeks off because I had a knee surgery. That just had to happen. But yeah, that was, and it was weird for me. I was like, is this cool? Like, is it really cool, boss, that I do this? Like, are you just telling me,
We West Coasters can be a little passive aggressive about certain things, and we don't always have healthy conflict or any conflict, even when it would be healthy. So especially, yeah, I know.
And people and my colleagues and my boss were not just saying it's okay. They were stoked for me. It was like being able to have that excitement and be, because I saw other people doing these similar things. So kind of the reason for Australia, New Zealand, and Fiji is I wanted to take the most epic water woman adventure. And it ended up being just that, like a trip that changed my life. It was odd. I surfed head high waves plus like the whole time. Went through the Yasawa Islands in Fiji, stayed on the North Island of New Zealand, still want to explore the South Island. And then Australia, I would love to see more parts of it, but I stayed a lot in, I went to like Byron Bay, Mullumbimby.
Yes, epic surf spots. Yeah,
so
Bay,
epic.
Right?
So the second incredible aspect was being in the Yasawa Islands and having this feeling of like, it's deep, or the most blue water you've ever felt. And it's like 90 degrees and humid. And I just had this like ultimate feeling of like, just connect, like just peace, just complete peace of like, wow, this is, you kind of, you work hard and you ever kind of wonder if you ever get to a place of like peace, like, am I going to ever feel that? And this was that first time in my life where I felt that ultimate peace, and it hit me. I was like, man, what would I tell my younger self? The little Chelsea, like, what do I wish that someone would have told me in the way that it would have landed with me? Because we say things in our society often like school's important, but we often don't say why school's important. And so, for example, school education's important, but the why, it gives you the power to choose.
What do you do with that education? What does it mean for you? What's the impact?
Right. It gives you it gives you knowledge, and the knowledge gives you the ability to choose options. Right. And like that. And so that inspired writing a children's book. And that is the sole project of my life. That is the coolest. Anything else, it's icing on the cake. That was everything.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and thank you so much, Chelsea. We will be right back, and we will dive right into that.
Neil here.
I'm so happy to share these stories of balance and fulfillment from the surf community in Santa Cruz, California. Here's a message from Ventana Surfboards and Supplies, featuring our Season 1 guest, David Dennis.
Ventana Surfboards and Supplies is the most environmentally responsible surf company on the planet. Our surfboards and paddleboards are handcrafted in Santa Cruz, California. They're one of a kind and built from historic and exotic reclaimed wood. Use code CHAMPION for 15% off your next order of apparel, surfboards, and more at ventanasurfboards.com.
So, Chelsea, you told us about your 3-week trip, and tell me now about this creative project. How did this book idea come into the picture for you, and how did you develop it? Because it really is a project. I'm really curious about it.
So the Little Wahine children's book came to fruition in the Yasawa Islands off Nadi, Fiji, the idea to do that book. And where that really came from was meeting a bunch of kids, honestly, in Fiji. Some of the most beautiful, beautiful smiles and full of love and laughter and light and just some of the most incredible memories of being able to connect just with people that live very differently than how I grew up, and meeting so many kids on the solo surf trip in Fiji, in Australia, in New Zealand, of all different races and backgrounds, inspired to write to my younger self, to, the woman who didn't have the luck and fortune of having, Dr. Joanna Brown, who's my mother, for a mom. And what would I tell them? And how would I express that story if I was to create this children's book? And speaking to my younger self felt important at that stage, because it was really this point, this pause in my life to be able to say, okay, being able to take a pause of feeling I have finally got to a place of some kind of balance in my life to be able to have that space to do something else outside of work in
security and choice.
Yeah.
And options.
Security and choice. Yeah. So that was really how it came to be.
And why you've told me about the way this kind of gave you time and space to reflect. How did that reflection lead you back to your younger self, Chelsea?
So the book forced me to really kind of come to terms with my own upbringing. So I am Hawaiian, I am Puerto Rican, I'm English, I'm Swedish. My birth dad's side is Hawaiian and Puerto Rican, and then my birth mom's side is English and Swedish. And in Hawaiian culture, Hanai is basically informal adoption. I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii. My sister and I were born there, but we were raised in Silicon Valley of the Bay Area. Instead of going into foster care, I went to one of the top private schools in Silicon Valley. And so I've always been very aware that I got the most lucky a kid could get with their mother. And I look back and I have the best childhood memories, and I've always been acutely aware that my life could have been very different. And, one of the things of what I love about Hawaii is all the different, if you ever go to Jamaica or Polynesian cultures, there's this beautiful blend of people that look different. They might speak in Jamaican patois or Hawaiian pidgin, but they look different, or they, there's native Hawaiian, but there's Hapa, like me, mixed, right? Yeah. And it's so beautiful. And one of the things whenever I go back to Hawaii is, when I'm paddling out in the lineup, everyone, it's like, well, it's another local. I also, I turn super pale in the winter, and then I get super brown in the summertime. And so that kind of identity thing happens when I go to Hawaii and I'm surfing. It's cool. And then the moment someone speaks to me, that's the difference, where I don't have the Hawaiian pidgin. Someone knows immediately that I'm not.
Pieces that make up our identity, which are multiple, and when we experience those intersection points, like for myself, I'm German American, and when I encounter Germans, there are those moments, those language moments, those comprehension checks that happen. It's like we're similar but different. We're similar but not the same, and you're not this category that I thought, and I'm not maybe the category that you thought, and this is getting interesting, right?
Exactly.
Those can be really beautiful moments when there's that trust and shared vulnerability in the right way.
So true. So true. And so much of, I think, my mental model, my views, my values, the way I look at life, the joie de vivre was instilled in the childhood. It's, I wasn't told as a kid who had a lot of energy that something's wrong with me. My mom threw me in the water and was like, swim, girl, and
so great.
And being able to be thrown in different arenas, whether it's basketball or swimming or golf or water polo, I was able to express myself, whether it was in art classes or writing, and I think with youth, there is this beautiful thing where I wanted to create a book, and the book's a series of chapters. It is illustrated by Jazz Meyer, who's based in Byron Bay. She is incredibly talented. The book designer is one of my best friends. She's a product designer at YouTube. She actually just joined the company. We met at Gametime, where she was the VP of design for a little bit. Long-term connect. And one of the beautiful things most people don't know about the book was the illustrations are Jazz. The creative vision and author and writing is me. And then insert Jihi, who came in, who's born in South Korea, raised in the States, lived in New York, San Francisco, mother of 2 girls, incredible human. She basically took my creative vision and the illustrations and then created this product that was both locally created, printed, bound in Santa Cruz, California. We wanted to do something that was local, but also she was able to create the women that I wanted to see, all different shapes and sizes. We did user interviews with a huge sample size of different people and gathered feedback.
User skills, user talents.
And leverage the different, what my day-to-day job is for these creative projects, which felt like the coolest way to start to use kind of what you do in the day-to-day for something that is for you, is about what is your story, who are you, and coming to terms with that, speaking to your younger self. And that book has allowed me to connect with little kids across the world, parents across the world, mothers, fathers, guardians, who sometimes the book isn't even for kids. It's for guardians, of just being able to, the life lessons resonated with them. And so that was really like the thing that allowed me to kind of go inward with this project, the soul project. Yeah.
I'd love to share with our audience in the show notes a link to view a preview and to understand this project. I know that there are several channels where you shared some of the images that you created for the project. So that was immediately grabbed me. I saw the Kickstarter page and I thought it was really interesting. Can you tell me maybe about how you were able to stick with it and turn this really powerful idea into something real, tangible out in the world and affecting those parents and guardians and people who are caring for us? How did you make that happen?
Yeah, Neil, you and I talked a lot about too, of like, one of the things I like to press or I highlight is I often feel like when people talk about accomplishments, they hear the accomplishments, right? They hear about how I did something, right? And yay, but they don't hear, they don't hear all the like rejection. They don't see the rejection emails. They don't see the no responses. And, I reached out with so it was the easiest thing I ever wrote in my life. It was therapeutic and it was for me. When I shared the script out, it's one of like, for better, for worse, my mom instilled this thing in me that it's like, I don't know. I just don't quit. I just can't, like, no matter how many, I've been rejected. So like no responses, emails, like haven't got job, like blah, 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 rejection. I've experienced it. And when it came to this book, I didn't get responses from any publishers. I queried a bunch of literary agents. No one responded. Everyone's asking about, what age demographic is your book for? I'm like, well, it is for 6 through 8, but
I think it's for human beings, to be
but
honest.
human beings,
When I read it, I was like, dang. It just hit me in the heart.
And that is something where everyone wants to put people in a box, and that's something that I've always, even ethnicity questions, what are you, and it's, I just, when it comes to that book, it was reaching out, no one responded. And so I was like, okay, start Googling how to self-publish a book. And
get scrappy, roll your sleeves up.
And one of the options here was how to fundraise. So first of all, this is the story of my life, honestly, is the serendipity. So my neighbor at the time in Santa Cruz, who was also my landlord, was one of the first founders of Community Printers, a printing cooperative in Santa Cruz. Started there in 1970 and is one of the most, he's like David Dent. It's like they're like family men, and they're so incredibly talented, and they are all about their community. And anyways, I was talking to him for about 6 months, and I think he thought I was just he laughed about this after I finished the project, was like, I get a lot of people asking me about, they say they want to do something like write a children's book, and they give me all the ideas. And he goes, I got to tell you, very few people can see that through. And I didn't want to doubt you, but I was like, I don't, okay, cool. I don't know if you can do it. And so I kept asking these questions, and I'm the type of person, if someone is the more it's oh, it's impossible, the more I'm like, is it? It's
sometimes for better or for worse for people like us, right? Because you can go through a lot of pain and a lot of body blows until you get through that gauntlet that you chose for yourself. And your friends and family sometimes might be like, are you sure? It looks painful, right? Why are you still trying that, right?
Exactly.
Whether it's career or realizing your creative dreams too.
Yeah. Sometimes you we really should walk away from some things, of rejection. But so anyways, it was a Kickstarter that was recommended as a way to raise the funds necessary to print locally in Santa Cruz. And so as an artist, I have no interest in creating anything if it's not actually, in my mind, logical and in a way that is sustainable. It's good for the environment. So I was pretty, as you would say, aggro about the book could naturally decompose if it was just left in Mother Nature. And doing this in Santa Cruz in California made the price high on a per unit basis. But I wanted to do that and support local. It's all part of the whole brand.
It's consistent. It's cohesive then with the story as well. I mean, you're not just everything, and their experience is going to. I like how you were really thoughtful about and intentional about every aspect, and insisting on that even when it made things difficult. Right?
Yes. And so it was the fundraiser, reaching out to everyone, telling about the project. And, it was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool group of women. My editor is actually who I'm working on a screenplay for a film right now. She's the wife of an engineer I worked with at Looker. And it was an all-female group to bring the little Wahine to life. And it's funny how projects and companies, there's a a spark and a moment in time that I think things can happen. And it was at a period in time in all of our lives where this book could happen. And it's, you know, you never know, but in today, like right now, I don't think it, like Jazz is now a mama, and you know, she has a lot of other things, and it's just incredible a period in time what people can create together. And it was definitely, it was a group effort. So anyways, long story long, we raised $30,000 on Kickstarter to print the book locally. We sold out of the first edition of the books with no marketing at all. It was just locally in California surf shops, some surf shops in New Zealand, and orders at surf shops kind of around the world type of thing.
That's amazing. So in the Pacific, on the U.S. Pacific coast, all the way to the New Zealand coast, people were connecting around this unique story, around these identities. I think that's beautiful to think about that. And it's Pacific waves on all these shores together, right? I mean, I know that I grew up in Seattle too, so I really like the sound of that.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing this project.
Oh man, yes, it is definitely the sole project of my life. I think the thing that I always try to, when I talk to people, is what is that thing? It sounds a little morbid, but if I were to, I actually thought about this in Fiji, if like I was to clock out, what do I wish I would have done? And I think life is every single day. It's what does joy look like today in my circumstance, and trying to focus on each day, and then the incremental, like you and I've talked about this, is like passion projects, where I want to go in my career for 5 to 10 years out versus like, what do I want to accomplish next year? They're all different. And then it's like little chipping away is to reveal what's in there. Yeah. That's the sculptor's work, right? Yeah. My grandfather is a sculptor and painter. Yeah. That's incredible. When it comes to careers, I really do think in 10-year pathway, I was very set on becoming, Linda Cohen was someone I looked up to, and being a sports broadcaster growing up. And I had the most fun. Like I started in radio, and then writing, and in college I had a TV show, and I could interview my friends on other student athletes on other teams and coaches. And I had internships, to, kind of get to that with ESPN and some sports teams in the front office. That you kind of like continue to rise in that industry, and then staying open to new paths and ways to evolve. And so like sports, but like for a startup, right, that seemed like a next natural pathway for me for this company. And then this problem I faced with data felt like a natural next step, right? And then growing up in the Bay Area, but not really spending that much time in Santa Cruz, it felt like that next step. And then from Looker, obviously so grateful for the acquisition and joining Google. Google to me feels like the closest I felt to when I studied at Berkeley, in that it's like, first of all, it's massive. You have a ton of people from all around the world who work at the company. And there is this growth mindset of continuous to learn and celebration of knowledge. And that feels really good after spending like 10 years on the grind of just like, okay, I can charge hard on the YouTube TV team, but I can also like learn again and like go back to like my craft and UX research and learn new things and like learn about my colleagues, and that feels really nice. And so 10 years is kind of how I think about paths. I know many people who start over in their 30s or 40s, and they have done incredible things. One of my good friends is a high-end fashion photographer in London, and then totally switched gears and filmed, wrote and directed his own film, and now live. And he did that in his 40s, and so it's pretty incredible. It's never over, if you will.
Yeah, I've been reading a book called The 100-Year Life, which was recommended to me by a mentor of mine. And one of the key things they talk about is that 100 years ago, like, your age was your stage, right? Your age, if your age was 20s, it was like maybe entering workforce, finishing university, if that's what you were doing 100 years ago. Then it was, work, and then it was retirement phase. So your age was really defining your stage. But in this book, the authors who are at the World Economic Forum are more saying that with the complexity of modern existence and also longevity of our lives, we have, especially in knowledge work, the ability to choose. There are more options, so that there may be two people who are choosing the same stage, but they're at very different ages. And so we can actually learn more cross-generationally. And there's a lot of things to get excited about with this, as well as all of the challenges as well. But yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that.
I love your point about there's a lot to learn from the different generations, because that is a core belief that I feel as well. If you kind of put all my closest girlfriends next to each other, they're actually of completely different decades. And I think that is something it's not intentional by any means, but it is something that I feel I do feel that strong sense that you can learn so much from different generations, and that there is this mind share that's beautiful, that we're kind of all going through similar things. And it's never like we've reached the mountaintop and it's like Shangri-La, right? But we continuously explore and chat and learn and like feel and cope and struggle and continuing to persevere and move on. And, kind of with the whole point of the Little Wahine is empowering courage to ride the waves of change. And, my mom is an anesthesiologist and a medical doctor, but if you ask her, she says, I have a PhD in perseverance. And
dang. That's one we all could benefit from. Shoot. And that is something that I think at the end of the day, no matter what background you have, no matter what college you went through, this life requires perseverance. And the people that I'm most inspired by, it's not about their resume. It's about how they've lived their life and how they continuously live their life on the day to day, whether that is how they eat, how they treat people, how, there's a love of not, kind of this constant learning and growth mindset. And to your point, that is where I feel when you're really thrown into a group of people from different generations, if you really listen and you engage, there's so much to learn, always. Chelsea, thank you so much for the conversation, for the work that you're doing, and also for the stories that you share. And I hope that your creativity continues to flourish in everything that you do.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for having me. This was fun.